the field of psychotherapy, there's a school of thought that influenced quite a few studies and resulting writings, specifically about developing consistent and genuine positive feelings towards oneself through what they refer to in that industry as re-nurturing experiences. Now, these experiences were usually practiced in the form of hypnosis, often for psychotic or borderline patients. So my curiosity went from mild to major when I realized how much these techniques have in common with my own ideas on self-mothering as a form of exploring, understanding, and ultimately embracing oneself, and ultimately about personal leadership. And that's what this session is about. Self-mothering as an effective self-exploration resource, as a way of bettering personal leadership by staying aligned with our personal magic. These re-nurturing techniques, and I'm super simplifying it here, were created by a hypnotherapist named Dr. Scagnelli Jobsis, and she believed that we could take on the role of the ego through hypnosis, and they did that to help someone repair a wound that was created when they didn't get something they needed. So, for example, if you had a horrible relationship with your mother because she was not well, she was emotionally unwell, maybe she was resentful or abusive, you could use re-nurturing techniques such as creative self-mothering, as Dr. Scagnelli Jobsis called it, to fill the gap and eventually to heal that wound. Now, I'm no advocate of hypnosis. I don't know enough about it to decide, but I do know this. As adults, we can absolutely use self-mothering as a way to understand and lead ourselves better. And we can use that knowledge to release relationships or create new ones that support how we want to feel, instead of having us feel like we're fighting for the space to explore ourselves and to be ourselves, which is what I heard a lot of you say in your responses as you went through that process of embracing your personal magic. You were fighting for that space to explore yourself, to express yourself, simply to be yourself. The techniques were rooted in the use of sensory imagery, which is basically using the patient's imagination to envision and experience the things they needed but didn't get. So, for example, say I was my 13-year-old self. The 13-year-old Akila would have needed to feel listened to and physically safe in my own home. In reality, during that time in my life, I didn't feel those things. I didn't feel listened to. I didn't feel physically safe. But I could still speak to that version of myself now and do things right now as my 38-year-old self to address those feelings and to change the reality about how those feelings affect the decisions I make today. So the first part of re-nurturing, if we were to take it outside of the framework of psychotherapy and apply it here to personal leadership, which is really what personal magic is all about, then it would start with us exploring and maybe writing down the ways we communicate with ourselves. We would do this so that we have a record of what self-talk is like for us. Again, just taking the opportunity to assume the role of the ego and explore what's happening in that space. One way I recommend doing this is through my Becoming the Observer ritual that I'm always sharing, the one where you set up your phone for 5 minutes and speak to yourself either through video or audio capture about your feelings on a particular thing. You watch, you listen, you make time to just be there for yourself. In the Becoming the Observer ritual, you delete the video or audio because the purpose in that case is just to get it off your chest, to bear witness on your own behalf and then let something go. But that's just one option for what to do with whatever you record, because another option is to collect those things, which is what I'm recommending here, and to use them to find out more about what's often referred to as our shadow beliefs. Shadow beliefs are beliefs that influence our choices, our perspectives, our entire lives without us consciously recognizing their influence. Shadow beliefs dictate what we think and also what we think we can and cannot do. So they decide our behaviors and they influence all our relationships, including, of course, our relationships with ourselves. The reason this is so relevant to personal magic is that we can't address what we don't see or face. We can't access or even understand how to lead ourselves if we aren't even aware of our whole selves. We can't be fully available for ourselves, to nurture or mother ourselves, if there are pockets of contrary beliefs that keep us tied to past experiences, right? The past matters. Yesterday matters. But today matters more. And right now matters most. So we have to ask ourselves about the beliefs that drive our actions, and we do that by approaching any aspects of ourselves, whether inner little girl or ourselves right now. We approach ourselves from a mother self perspective. So, for example, if you didn't feel like your opinions mattered as a child or in your last romantic relationship, you can use the Becoming the Observer ritual to speak to yourself about that in your now, in your present life. Or if you're an out loud healer like me, you can write about it on your blog or join a writing circle. Alicia Summer has one called Liberated Lines over at aliciasummer.com, where you get prompts about aspects of self-inquiry and self-expression, and you write about them so that you can see and hear your real thoughts outside of the noise of your mind. When we can identify the things that keep us from feeling how we want to feel and making choices in alignment with what we say we want, then we can nurture ourselves over to safer spaces that are more suitable for us to grow and to thrive and to feel safe trusting ourselves and trusting our magic. Essentially, you and I decide how valuable we are and how capable we are based on a particular set of assumptions we carry around in our minds. Those mental assumptions are based on our reactions to experiences we've had, and they make up what we believe about ourselves. The shadow beliefs are the particular assumptions that we're not conscious of and that push us towards unwanted behaviors. So, for example, if your last 3 romantic partners were unfaithful, you may have developed a shadow belief like, I get cheated on, or I attract partners who cheat, or I never find partners who see me as enough. If that's the belief you have, then it'll be tough for you to recognize and discern in your future relationships because your lens is already focused on the idea that you get cheated on. So you might find yourself adjusting to cheating behaviors instead of rejecting them or rationalizing them in some way. Or you may not trust a partner who may actually be faithful because you believe yourself to be the person who attracts cheaters. Shadow beliefs, in and of themselves, are tough enough to recognize and work through, but add to that our current reality of this comparison-based life through social media and quote-unquote reality TV and just the overall barrage of stimuli, and it can be really difficult to recognize just how much these unaddressed beliefs get in the way of us being connected to the reality of our magic. We trade in self-trust for fear, and we let other people's ideas about our lives take priority over our own self-motivated choices. And we're taught that our own self-motivated choices are things we should feel guilty about because they're selfish or even unrealistic, when in reality that is not the case. So, what do we do about that? How do we use this bit of insight around re-nurturing and self-mothering and shadow beliefs to make more space for our personal magic? We speak our psyche's language. If we believe, and I certainly do, that our ideas about ourselves, the ones we recognize and the ones in the shadows, influence our actions and the state of our lives, when we speak to those spaces, we can learn what to keep and what to shed. And when it comes to exploring what to keep and what to shed, the Becoming the Observer ritual is perfect for that. So you start by asking yourself these questions and you record your responses. You listen to your responses at least once per day. And maybe you use a journal just to jot down the feelings you feel as you listen to yourself. And once you've done that for about a week, gone through the questions about your feelings, gone through the questions about the areas in your life where you felt a contrary feeling, where you feel not listened to. The example we gave of feeling like you're constantly being cheated on, asking yourselves questions around that for about a week, recording the responses, and then going back and then just taking some notes, just nothing too detailed, but just to really explore your feelings around what you recorded and what thoughts came up when you sat to record. So once you've done that for about a week, then you can start paying more attention to your actions and feelings because now you have sort of like a tracking system, right? to see where you are in your journey. So you can start being more conscious about the language surrounding your choices just by doing that simple thing. And you can start to see the difference between the choices that feel good and right for you and the ones that are made out of fear, or the ones that you start to see yourself in a negative light throughout that. Once you've done that sort of mining of your feelings and emotions for about a week, then you can start paying more attention to your actions and your feelings. You can start being more conscious about the language surrounding your choices, because you'll know you would have been familiarized with it outside of your own brain, because you would have recorded it. You're watching, you're observing, you're taking notes, like you're your own therapist in a sense. And I really believe in that. It's a wonderful way to get in touch with what you're feeling and not necessarily recognizing consciously. So again, you can start to become more conscious about the language surrounding your choices. And you can start to see the differences between the choices that feel good and right and the choices that feel like they're made out of fear or experiences you see as bad. So this work isn't about a 5-step cure. So you'll rarely hear me tell you exactly what you need to do to resolve what you find you want to change or shed. It's far too personalized a process for me to ever feel right doing that. That's why I coach, so that I can help a woman to do the work in a way that makes sense for her particular reality. However, we can still use this framework, these set of principles that are true no matter what your particular forms of barriers to embracing personal magic may be. So while this isn't about some 5-step cure, it is about being available for yourself by starting to peek into the parts of you that affect your day, your mood, your choices, and your life without your permission. This is about recognizing that and continuing to recognize it in all forms so you can start to lovingly lead yourself in another direction. And that direction, of course, is toward the optimistic, trusting, confident part of you that believes that you can have the things you want and that you can build a fulfilling and authentically happy life for yourself by understanding yourself, by being in alignment with your unique magic, your you-ness, and steadily healing the spaces where hurt and pain cause shadow beliefs to put you where you'd rather not be. And we'll talk more about self-trust next week when I share with you a curious but all too common barrier to personal magic. This is Akilah S. Richards on Embracing Your Personal Magic. Thanks for listening.